Jessica Soho broke down on air and the entire Philippines broke down right along with her. Because what Alexandra Eala did on that Spanish clay wasn't merely tennis, it was a powerful declaration of resilience. Here was a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines standing tall in the middle of one of the most punishing surfaces in all of professional tennis, a surface that had swallowed her whole tournament after tournament. And yet, she refused. She absolutely refused to stop fighting. What unfolded in Madrid stunned an entire nation. And if you think this story is only about a single tennis match, stay with it until the very end, because what played out both on and off that red clay court in Spain is something the Philippines will be talking about for a generation to come. Before diving into what happened in Madrid, you first have to understand who Alexandra Eala truly is, and more importantly, where she came from. She was just 14 years old when she left the Philippines and flew to Majorca, Spain, to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy. 14. While most kids her age were still worrying about school lunches and weekend plans, Alex Eala was already on a tennis court in Spain, being molded by the exact same philosophy that forged the greatest clay court player who ever lived. The Rafa Nadal Academy doesn't waste time on feelings. It demands your fight, your sliding ability, your spin, and your capacity to grind through a 6-game losing streak without breaking. For years, Eala absorbed every lesson. She watched intently, she sweated profusely, and she grew stronger. But there's something unique about growing up in someone else's country and perfecting your craft on clay that is literally not your home soil. Eventually, you have to return and prove everything you've learned. And that proof isn't handed out in practice sessions. It is earned, point by grueling point, under intense pressure in front of the entire world. By the time 2025 arrived, Alex Eala had already made the Philippines erupt with pride. She entered the Miami Open as a wild card ranked 140th in the world and delivered a massive shock by defeating Madison Keys. Then she stunned world number 2 Iga Swiatek. Before long, she became the first Filipino woman ever to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal. In one unforgettable week, she single-handedly rewrote Philippine tennis history. And yet clay remained her ultimate mountain. The surface that had raised her was also the one that kept humbling her repeatedly. In 2025, she managed only a 2-4 record on clay. She fell in the first round of the French Open. She suffered defeats against players ranked far below where her expectations sat. It became the noticeable crack in her armor that rivals quietly targeted and that her coaches worried about in private. But 2026 was meant to be different. She had gone back to the Rafa Nadal Academy with a clear mission to fix this weakness once and for all. She trained harder on the red dirt than she ever had before. She sat down with her coach Joan Bosch and declared with conviction, "This year, clay is different." The Philippines believed in her, and as the clay court swing kicked off, the whole nation tuned in to watch. So when everything you've worked for finally collides with the very test that has broken you before, what do? What does Alex Eala do? You're about to find out, and here, where it gets intensely real, because what happened next nobody could have predicted. The 2026 clay court swing opened in Linz, Austria. It was supposed to serve as a confidence booster, a gentle warm-up to help her shake off the hardcourt rust and regain her footing on the red dirt. Eala won her first match convincingly, defeating Julia Grabher 6-4, 6-3. The Philippines let out a collective sigh of relief. The Rafa Nadal training was clearly paying off. She looked composed, purposeful, and fully in control. Then came Jelena Ostapenko in the round of 16, and the clay delivered its verdict. Ostapenko, a former French Open champion who thrives on the surface, dismantled Eala's game piece by piece. The young Filipino found herself chasing balls she simply couldn't reach, shanking shots she would normally bury on hard courts, and sliding into positions that still didn't feel completely natural. She lost and moved on. Next stop was Stuttgart on indoor clay, a different kind of challenge. Leylah Fernandez, ranked 25th in the world at the time, was waiting for her in the very first round. Sharp, athletic, and aggressive, Fernandez delivered a straightforward lesson, 6-1, 6-4. It wasn't close. It wasn't competitive. It was a clear message written in red clay and delivered without mercy. 3 clay tournaments into 2026, and she had 2 early exits. A growing sense of unease began to settle in. And then came Madrid, the Mutua Madrid Open, a prestigious WTA 1000 event played at altitude where the ball bounces higher, rallies stretch longer, and every margin is razor-thin. This was the same tournament where Eala had lost the previous year. This was the event she had openly said she wanted to conquer. Her opening match pitted her against Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, a former French Open finalist ranked 116th but with 17 previous appearances at the Madrid Open. A woman who knew every single grain of that red dirt. Eala, ranked 44th, was the favorite on paper, but clay doesn't care about rankings or paper expectations. What followed was nothing short of controlled brilliance. Eala claimed 76% of points on her serve. She broke Pavlyuchenkova 4 times. She produced sharp defensive tennis whenever the Russian posed a threat, then relentlessly raised the tempo the moment an opening appeared. When Pavlyuchenkova called for a medical timeout, Eala didn't hesitate. She broke to love for a 4-2 lead and never looked back. Final score 6-3 6-3 in 1 hour and 31 minutes. I feel really great, Eala said afterwards, switching effortlessly between English and Spanish like a player who truly belonged. Every time I come here, I feel really comfortable. I feel at home. Every game at this level is a battle. I'm really happy about that. Back home in the Philippines, television screens glowed brightly. Social media exploded with excitement. Jessica Soho, the most trusted face in Filipino broadcasting, the journalist who had covered every national triumph and tragedy for 3 decades, reportedly watched the match live. Word quickly spread through newsrooms that she was visibly and deeply moved. Because this wasn't just Alex Eala winning a tennis match. This was a Filipino girl standing on Spanish clay, speaking Spanish in Madrid, and declaring with sincerity, "I feel at home," on the very surface that had broken her so many times before. But the story doesn't end there. What came next is the part that broke Jessica Soho's heart and the heart of an entire nation. Elise Mertens stepped onto the court in Madrid like someone who had already decided the outcome. The Belgian, ranked 21st in the world and seeded 19th, isn't flashy. She doesn't possess the explosive power of Sabalenka or the magic of Swiatek. What she does have is something far more lethal on clay: patience, precision, and the ability to dictate every single rally from the very first point to the last, never offering a breath, never giving a foothold. Against Eala, that patience became a devastating weapon. From the opening game, Mertens controlled the tempo and surged to a 5-2 lead in the first set. Every rally unfolded exactly as she wanted. Eala fought back as she always does. There were brief glimpses: quick-footed defense along the baseline, a daring drop shot that drew gasps from the crowd, a sharp forehand return that momentarily threatened to swing the momentum. But those sparks flickered and faded. Mertens was simply operating on a level that Eala's current clay game could not yet match. The first set fell 6-2. The second set began with Mertens racing to a 4-0 lead. Eala held serve in the fifth game to make it 4-1, refusing to surrender quietly. She even raced to a 30-0 advantage in the sixth game. The crowd leaned in, maybe, just maybe. Then the errors crept in. A mistimed forehand, an attack that sailed long. Mertens smelled blood and pounced, winning back-to-back points to seize control and eventually close out the match 6-1. Final score 6-2 6-1 in just 1 hour. Mertens fired 3 aces, Eala had 0. The Belgian won 61 of 99 total points. She broke Eala, served 5 times, and was never broken herself, not once. On clay, patience is currency, and Mertens spent it generously while Eala simply ran out of time. It marked Eala's third consecutive early exit on clay during the 2026 season. Across 7 clay tournaments stretching back to 2024, she had managed only 3 wins in 10 matches, a career win rate of just 39.1% on the surface. The match lasted barely 60 minutes, but the accumulated weight of those statistics, those repeated early exits, and those moments when her game simply refused to translate onto the red dirt hit the Philippines like a thunderclap. Back home, media rooms fell silent. Social media shifted rapidly from celebration to deep concern. And somewhere inside a television studio, Jessica Soho, who had followed this girl's journey from the very beginning and watched the Philippines fall completely in love with Alex, was seen with eyes glistening with emotion. Because she understood something a simple scoreboard could never capture: this wasn't failure. This was the heavy cost of being only 20 years old and learning on the biggest stages in the world, growing in real time, losing in real time while 30 million people watched every single point. And here the story turns uncomfortable because the internet wasted no time sharing its opinions, and not all of them were kind. Within hours of the loss to Mertens, social media in the Philippines fractured into 2 distinct camps. The first camp, the Believers, flooded comment sections with support. These were the fans who had followed Eala since her ITF days, who had watched her leave home at 14 to train in Spain, and who had screamed with joy when she beat Keys and Swiatek in Miami. She's only 20 years old, they wrote. She's still learning, give her time. Hashtags trended. Videos of her greatest moments circulated widely. People reminded one another that she had already achieved things no Filipino woman in tennis had ever done before. The second camp, the skeptics, made their voices loud and clear. Why can't she win on clay? They demanded. She trained at the Rafa Natal Academy. If not there, then where? Some made unfair comparisons. Others questioned her team's choices. Many pointed directly at that 39.1% career win rate on clay and stated bluntly, this is a problem that isn't going away. The tension between those two camps, the raw pride colliding with raw frustration, crackled with electricity. It was the complicated, heartfelt tension that only arises when an entire nation has poured its hopes into one athlete, when her victories feel like collective triumphs and therefore her defeats feel like shared losses. But here is what the skeptics missed. Here is what the cold scoreboard could never reveal. After the match in Madrid, Eala walked into the press area and was asked to evaluate her clay campaign so far. She didn't deflect responsibility. She didn't offer excuses. She spoke with the calm, measured honesty of someone who had been reflecting deeply on the issue, someone who understood exactly where the gaps existed and was actively working to close them. Earlier in the season, she had told Rappler what she believed set her apart. I don't think I'm the best in the world at any of those things: forehand, backhand, drop shot. The thing that I can control the most is how I think, how I approach certain obstacles. That mindset, that grounded, almost philosophical approach to competition, is exactly what Jessica Soho and millions of Filipinos were witnessing. Not merely the points scored, but the person behind them. Former world number 4 Greg Rusedski weighed in publicly on his podcast, and his verdict was unequivocal. For me, I'm always optimistic about her. She's challenging herself. She has a great team around her. She's fully committed. She's going to get stronger physically. She's going to get more tactically astute. She's going to start hitting the ball harder. She's going to figure it out. 3 simple words, figure it out, carried more weight in the middle of all the noise, trending hashtags, debates, and divided opinions than any single scoreline ever could. Yet the question that hung over everything, the question the Philippines couldn't stop asking itself, was this: is Roland Garros too soon, or is it exactly the right time? Here is something that rarely makes headlines but carries enormous importance. Eala has been training at the Rafa Natal Academy since she was 14 years old. That equals 6 full years of her young life spent on Spanish clay, immersed in the coaching philosophy of the man who lifted 14 French Open titles. The King of Clay didn't just share the same courts with her. He personally hit with her during the 2026 preseason. Eala later spoke about that session with visible awe. I was super locked in. It was the first time he had hit in so long. I was really tired after the practice. Rafa's intensity never goes away, and that's one of the things that everyone looks up to him for: his work ethic and intensity. So to be able to feel that firsthand was really great. Then she added something that reveals everything about her current state of mind. Anything I can take from Rafa, I'll take with pride, she continued, and clay in general is a little more gritty. It's a little more physical than most of the other surfaces. She knows, she has always known, clay is not a surface you conquer through talent alone. Clay is a surface you earn through physical endurance, tactical intelligence, emotional resilience, and always time. What the statistics fail to show is the internal architecture quietly being constructed. At the Australian Open 2026, thousands of Filipinos bought tickets, formed queues stretching hundreds of yards, and transformed Court 6 into a vibrant sea of Philippine flags. Martina Navratilova publicly stated that tournament organizers had made a scheduling error by not placing Eala on a larger court. The BBC picked up the story and turned the crowd phenomenon into an international headline. At Dubai, she defeated 8th-seeded Jasmine Paolini 6-1-7-6 on hard courts. At Indian Wells, she staged a thrilling comeback from the brink against Yulia Putintseva, winning 7-5, 4-6, 7-5. At Miami, she played the longest match of her career, 3 hours and 20 minutes. When asked how she prepares to face opponents who are bigger and stronger, she replied, I have different other strengths as well, not just power, different layers to my game. Layers, that single word captures it perfectly. Every new layer is being carefully added, one tournament at a time. And Eala herself offered this self-aware reflection at the start of the year. I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know if it's going to be forever, so I try to enjoy as much as I can while it's happening. That kind of maturity and self-awareness at only 20 years old, while carrying the hopes of an entire nation, is extraordinarily rare. And it is precisely why Jessica Soho wasn't simply watching a tennis player suffer a loss in Madrid. She was watching a young woman navigate overwhelming pressure with a grace that very few athletes, at any age, ever managed to discover. The clay hasn't broken her, the clay is forging her. And that leads us to the moment that brought the entire Philippines to a sudden stop. The announcement nobody saw coming at the conclusion of this clay swing. Eala is entered in the main draw of the Italian Open in Rome in early May. And after that comes Roland Garros, the French Open, on the same red clay, broadcast live to the world stage. Consider the full weight of the context. This is the identical surface that has exposed every technical gap in her game across a 7-tournament stretch. This is the same surface where she lost in the first round during her French Open debut in 2025. This is the very surface where Elise Mertens had just dismantled her 6-2 6-1 in under an hour. And yet she is walking straight toward it anyway. Not with blind confidence, not with the arrogance of someone who fails to grasp the difficulty, but with the quiet, earned determination of a player who has already invested 6 years living on clay, learning directly from the greatest clay court champion in history, and who still has so much more left to prove. Context: PH captured it perfectly after the Madrid defeat. The clay may still challenge her, but Eala is learning slide by slide, rally by rally. That is the story. That has always been the story. ESPN had noted before the clay swing even began that this stretch wasn't primarily about collecting titles. It was about demonstrating tangible growth, longer rallies, smarter shot selection, a deeper feel for the surface. Not about winning everything, but about real progress. And genuine growth rarely looks polished. It looks exactly like Eala's 2026 clay season has looked so far: a first-round win in Linz followed by a loss. A first-round victory in Madrid over a former Grand Slam finalist followed by another loss. Bright sparks, then necessary reality checks. Progress mixed with sobering lessons. But here is what Jessica Soho knows and what 30 million Filipinos are gradually coming to understand. This girl is not finished. She is not stuck. She is building something that doesn't yet have a final scoreboard attached to it. She became the first Filipino to win a main draw Grand Slam match when she defeated Clara Tauson at the US Open in 2025. She became the first to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal, the first to crack the top 100, the first to stand on a Madrid tennis court speaking Spanish and say with complete sincerity, "I feel at home." Every single first serves as another foundation stone, and the house being constructed on top of those stones is still very much a work in progress. When Jessica Soho reportedly broke down while watching the full Madrid journey unfold, the brilliant first-round win, the brutal second-round loss, the nation's soaring pride crashing into collective heartbreak within the span of just 48 hours, she wasn't crying because Eala had failed. She was crying because she fully grasped the enormous weight this 20-year-old carries every single time she steps onto a court. The flag, the history, the dreams of every Filipino child who has ever picked up a tennis racket, and the towering expectations of a nation that had waited decades for someone like her to finally arrive. And Eala carries all of it, match after match, without ever flinching. So the real question isn't whether she can eventually win on clay, the question is simply when. And judging by everything we know, the years at the Rafa Nadal Academy, the mental framework she has built, the strong coaching team by her side, and the hard-earned experience accumulating tournament by tournament, the answer feels not just possible but inevitable. It isn't a matter of if Eala will conquer clay, it's a matter of when, and the only remaining question is whether you'll be watching when that moment finally arrives. This is the story of a clay court struggle that from the outside appears like a setback: 3 early exits, a 6-2 6-1 loss in Madrid, and a surface that has not yet fully yielded. But look closer and what you see is a 20-year-old Filipino woman doing something extraordinarily difficult in complete public view, with grace, honesty, and an absolute refusal to shy away from the remaining work that still needs to be done. Jessica Soho broke down because the Philippines broke down. Not in despair, but in the overwhelming, heartfelt recognition that what they are witnessing is something truly generational. A journey that is still being written, rally by rally, on red clay in Spain, in Rome, and soon in Paris. Eala is not finished. She hasn't even truly started. And the clay had better be ready. Drop a comment below. Do you think Eala will win a match at Roland Garros 2026, or is the French Open still one season too early? Let us know. We read every single one. And if this story moved you, if you felt the pride, the heartbreak, and the enduring hope, hit that subscribe button right now, because this journey is far from over. We will be here every single step of the way, telling the story of the Philippines' greatest tennis daughter. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this with every Filipino who needs to see it.